If you are an 80s fan, if you are an 80s baby, you are going to really enjoy this book. However, I do have some criticisms for this book. In this book, we are following a female serial killer. I am obsessed. I had to put this book down and walk away. What up, my channel? Welcome back to another video. I'm Jessie, and you're watching Welcome to my January wrap up. I had an amazing freaking reading month. I cannot wait to talk to you about what I accomplished in January because it was literally legendary. I cannot believe how my reading month went. I gave every single book that I read in the month of January 5 out of 5 stars, and I read a lot of books. But before I get into the nitty and the gritty of all of the books that I read in January, I have to give a big shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Book of the Month. Book of the Month is a super popular, fast-growing e-commerce subscription where every single month you pick one of their 5 offered books and they send it to you in a nice blue box. Book of the Month is fantastic because they put in the work. They do all of the legwork in keeping track of what's new, the hottest releases, so that you don't have to do that for yourself. And they essentially have this team that just goes through debut emerging authors as well as well-seasoned authors who are putting out books. They scour the market and they take the 5 of the hottest books and put them up on their website for you to choose from. These books are of all genres. Book of the Month is a risk-free service, so you can pause your subscription at any time, no cost to you. They also do feature add-ons every single month. All of their books are always hardcover, new releases, and sometimes early releases. So you'll have books in your hands that other people are pining for. They're all Book of the Month editions as well that you can't get anywhere else. Let me talk to you about the 5 books that Book of the Month is centering this month in February. We have A River Enchanted. This is a gorgeous, fantastical story about 2 girls that are kidnapped by elemental spirits, and these 2 boys who once were childhood enemies go on a mission to recover them. Then we have Vladimir, which is all the rage right now, and this is a story about a professor who is rumored to have had an affair with one of his students. Then we have an exciting domestic thriller called The Golden Couple. This is a book about a couple that seems to have it all, except they don't, and their lives are turned further into the world of chaos when they meet a disgraced therapist, not a psychologist. Then we have Peach Blossom Spring. This is a historical fiction novel set in 1938 in China, and we get to follow 3 generations of a Chinese family. And finally, we have Don't Cry For Me, which I love, is just matching the vibe today. But Don't Cry For Me is a story about a dying father who is writing letters to his gay son in attempts at reconciling. Those are the 5 books that Book of the Month is spotlighting this month, but don't forget that they have add-ons to check out as well. If you want to get your first box for only $9.99, use my code BOWTIES, which is linked in the description box below. Thanks again to Book of the Month for sponsoring another one of my videos. Now, without further ado, let us get into my January wrap-up. As of right now, I have not calculated my reading stats, so I'm going to insert them here. In the month of January, I read a total of 11 books, 3,129 pages read, an average star rating of 5 stars, and 6 genres. For the genres I read, 1 historical fiction book, 1 horror book, 1 classic, 2 contemporary books, 2 thriller books, and 4 fantasy books. For the format read, I consumed 9 books physically and 2 books audibly. For my goals, I read 0 library books. 5 out of the 11 books that I read were from my long list. 33% of the books that I read were written by authors of color. I did meet my fantasy goal, but I failed my science fiction and comics goal. I got so many comments in my last video, my last wrap up, about how you enjoyed me sharing my reading intentions versus how I actually read. So I'm going to remind y'all what was on my January TBR so that we can see how good I did at following my TBR cards. So in the month of January, I pulled the Battle Ball Gown card, a book where fashion is crucial to the story. For that, I selected Astrid Sees All, which I did read. Then we had the Get Global card, a book that is not set in Europe, the United States, or the United Kingdom. I foolishly selected Violetta, and I got that messed up because sometimes I think that this prompt is USA, UK, or Canada, but then I remembered it's all of Europe. Once I completed filming, I ended up swiping that out for Notes from a Crocodile, which I did not read. Then we have Pretty Boy, a male character who challenges masculine norms, and for that, I selected Black Boy Out of Time, which I didn't read. Then for the Copycat card, a book that matches your current outfit, I selected She Who Became the Sun, which I did read. For the Secret Lovers card, a book that you've wanted to read for many years, I selected The Art of Dying, which I did read. For the Akweke Emezi card, I selected Detransition Baby, which I did read. For the Page to Screen card, I selected World War Z, which I did read. Lost in Translation, I selected Notes from a Crocodile, which again, I did not read. And finally, for the Throwback card to read a book that was written prior to the 2000s, I selected The Price of Salt, which I did read. So as I said, I gave every single book that I read in January 5 out of 5 stars. I don't think that's ever happened. I do not think I've ever had a month where everything I read was 5 out of 5 stars. I cannot wait to gush about these books. Like, I would much rather come on here and tell y'all how much I loved books than rant about them. I know you guys love it when I rant, but I prefer to be happy. The first book I'm going to talk about is Akata Woman. I reread the first 2 books, Akata Witch and Akata Warrior, because I was going to interview Dr. Nnedi Okorafor, the author, over the release of Akata Woman. I will leave that interview with Dr. Okorafor in the description box below if you haven't seen it. It was the absolute highlight of my life. I literally think that I peaked in that exact moment. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Insibidi scripts, this is a series where we follow a young albino Nigerian girl named Sunny. Sunny is Nigerian American, and she finds out that she is a witch. So in this book, you get to see her live her human life and her magical life, which is completely secret from all mortals. So her parents don't even know what's going on. And she gets into these magical adventures. This book, Akata Woman, is one of my new favorite books of all time. I got emotional during it. It is such an amazing book, and I highly, highly recommend the audiobook. The performance for the audiobook is just phenomenal. So if you're able to consume stories that way, that is the way to go, in my opinion. I also read a little modern classic, and that is World War Z. Whew, I did not think I was going to enjoy this book because zombies are not my thing. Zombies are my least favorite subgenre of horror. They don't do anything for me. They don't scare me. I'm not a gore person, and it's not because I'm squeamish. It's because it just does nothing for me. Like, it just does absolutely nothing. It doesn't get my heart racing. This book terrified me. Multiple times during the reading process, I had to put this book down and walk away and do something because I was like hyperventilating. I was on the edge of my seat. My heart was pounding. My blood was pumping. I was so scared reading some of these stories. So for those of you who don't know, this is kind of like a history book of people giving interviews of what they were doing and how they survived the zombie apocalypse when it hit. And so it's like, I think it's like 10 years after the world was just completely destroyed by this virus, which just destroyed everything. It still, to this very moment, is astounding that a short story collection, right, and the fact that it was a zombie collection scared the pants off of me. I have never read a scarier book. And by that, I don't mean that it's scary. I don't mean it's like the most disturbing, the most gruesome, outland, because it's not. I have read things that are scarier than this, right? But there's something about how the story was told, the stories rather. And I think a big part of the reason why I was so scared is because you get so much detail and it feels so real. It feels like everything was thought out, and you get stories of people who were astronauts in space watching this happen. You get stories of people who were on ships at sea. You get stories of people who were living in Paris and they decide to escape to the catacombs, and then the zombies get down in the catacombs and you're down there under miles and miles of tunnels in the dark with zombies chasing you. And the claustrophobia of that setting made my blood curdle. It was so freaking terrifying. And then one of the stories about you, like the zombies can just survive underwater. So sometimes people are just swimming, minding their own business, and then a zombie just drags you under. It just was so freaking scary. And there was one story about this woman who kind of parachutes out of a plane that's going down, and there's a voice on the radio trying to direct her to safety. That story, I was done. Once I read that story, I had to put the book down and like put my hand on my hip and just like stand here and look around. I was shook. 5 out of 5 stars. I heard that the audiobook is even better. So I'm going to reread this via audio. And I just know that I'm going to be freaking terrified the whole time. So then I read She Who Became the Sun for NB Book Club, the non-binary book club that I run. This is described as a Mulan Song of Achilles retelling. And it follows a girl who is given a destiny that she refuses to accept. She is given a destiny of being nothing. And instead of accepting that, she rejects that destiny and she claims the identity of her dead brother and then moves on to become essentially a leading figure in the military, rising through the ranks and accruing a ton of power. This is book 1 in a fantasy series, and I completely understand the hype. It was phenomenal. It was very, very well thought out. The characters are what make this book shine, though, in my opinion. Ouyang, amazing, absolutely amazing, my whole heart and soul. The relationship between Ouyang and I forget his name, that was kind of the Song of Achilles-esque portion of this book, and it was flawless. However, I do have some criticisms for this book. I did give it 5 out of 5 stars specifically because of the role of spirituality in the story. That really spoke to me, and I couldn't not give the book 5 out of 5 stars for that alone. But the military strategy in this book is quite weak, in my opinion. The military strategy and the war elements need a lot of work. So if you're not a person who needs the author to have a really good handle on combat, then you will definitely enjoy this book. That was one of my qualms. The other one, which has nothing to do with the strength of the book itself, I personally did not care very much about the sapphic romance. Like, I didn't believe in them. I don't buy into that relationship at all. And I know that was a big selling point for a lot of people. For me, it just did nothing. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I have an entire live show that I did with Sandra. We had such an amazing time. So that is going to be in the description box below. Then we have one of my favorite novels of all time, and that is None But the Righteous. I received an ARC as well as a finished copy of this book, and I just don't understand how no one is raving about it because I am obsessed. So this is a story about Ham, who is 19 years old, and after Hurricane Katrina hits and destroys everything he holds dear, he goes on a mission to locate his foster mother. But during this, he is possessed by a spirit who wants his body for himself. So the spirit that who is slowly taking control of Ham's body is from Peru in the 17th century. And so the spirit is the one telling the story. And the spiritual realism in this book just moved me so deeply. It spoke to me so deeply. I absolutely loved it. I read the first paragraph of this book and wept like a British lord. It is such a phenomenal book, and it's short. The storytelling is gorgeous. This is not a plot-driven novel at all. This is 100% character-driven. It's 100% like the meanderings of this disembodied spirit who is trying to become embodied, and the spiritual realism, the spiritual storytelling was brilliant. 5 out of 5 stars. So then I read a classic for Sapphic-a-thon as well as my TBR cards, and that classic is none other than The Price of Salt. I have a vlog where I chronicle my entire journey reading this book in the description box below, so check that out because I have a dedicated vlog and I'm very descriptive. My journey is very descriptive. I'm not going to be going into too much detail with this, but this is a classic book about this young sales clerk who falls in love with a bored housewife, and they have this rendezvous. But because of the time period, they have to keep their love a secret for very obvious reasons, you know, because they're both two women. I had a very wild experience with this book because I hated it for most of it. But in the end, 5 out of 5 stars. I also finally got to read Astrid Sees All. This is why I enjoy my TBR cards, because they forced me to pull for books that I would not have picked up. Like, I would not have picked this book up in January, even though it was one of my most anticipated releases of last year. So I'm really glad that they made me grab it because I enjoyed the pants off of it. This is a really good period piece. It's set in the 80s, and we are following a young girl who is a plain Jane who becomes absolutely obsessed with another girl, and they decide to move in together, and they kind of go on this journey of just getting really into the New York nightclub scene in the 80s. They do lots of drugs, and it's not really a plot-driven book at all. It's just about these two girls and the shenanigans that they get into. It feels like you're really in the 80s. It's very vibrant. It's got actual celebrities. It has a lot of name drops and interactions. So if you are an 80s fan, if you are an 80s baby, you are going to really enjoy this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars despite hating Astrid. I hated her. I'm actually going to make a video about characters that I don't like, and she's going to be in it, so I'm not even going to explain why I didn't like her, but I just... please don't get me started. I can't. This video is going to be long enough as it is. I just simply cannot with this girl. But it was really good. And if you want a really dark novel about obsession, something that's a slow burn, this is going to be the one for you. Then I read A History of Wild Places by Shay Earnshaw. This was not on my TBR. This was a book that I started last year and did not get around to finishing. I'm actually reading this for a secret video, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But this is a book about this cult that exists in the woods. They're very seclusive. What is seclusive? Who is she? They're very secluded and reclusive is what I was trying to say. And the reason for their seclusion is because they fear the sickness that exists within the trees. And if you go out of the town, you get infected with the sickness. And if anyone comes into the town, they could bring the sickness with them. And so the villagers of this town actually have no idea if the outside world has been destroyed by this sickness or not. So the book starts off with a man named Travis Wren who has the ability to touch an object and see its history. And because he has this ability, he is asked to go find this missing girl who went missing at the edge of this cult. And so he goes into the cult and is never seen again. And from that point on, we start following people who live in this village, and you're trying to figure out how these stories mesh, and the mystery, it's just wild. Obviously, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's such a good book, and I can't wait to talk to y'all more about it. Again, this is a new favorite, and that book is none other than Olga Dies Dreaming. I loved this book. I loved this book. I was sent this, I think, in December, and I had so many books to put that I had to read before the end of the year, but I started this regardless because I just couldn't look away from it. My TBR cards also picked it, but I was like so excited. You know what I'm saying? And I didn't get to finish it in December, so I finished it in January, and wow. Just freaking wow. I want an adaptation. I want book 2. I want books 3, 4, 5, and 6. It was amazing. So this is a really political novel where we're following 2 affluent siblings, one who is in the wedding planning business and the other who is a politician. And the politician, the brother, is gay, and Olga is just, she's just a hot mess. And so it's about these siblings who are the children of 2 really intense revolutionaries. Unfortunately, the father has passed away due to drug use, but their mother is a huge outlaw, and she's trying to bring about real change in Puerto Rico. And their mom has amassed this huge following. She's become quite a dangerous individual, someone really to be reckoned with. And even though she's estranged from her 2 children, she reaches out to them because she has a plan. And it's just like you're following their personal lives and everything that they're going through. There's a romance in there too. And then you're following this political element. And I loved how deep deeply it got into the history of Puerto Rico as well as its present, and the way that Puerto Ricans just aren't given aid, the way that the rest of the United States responds when Puerto Rico is in danger. And there's just so many politics that are at play. Definite content warning for sexual assault, for drug use, just for so many things. But it is one of the most real and heart-touching and gripping novels I've ever read. I loved the romance, and y'all know I cannot stand romances. It is so good. It was so good. It is amazing. And I really loved how therapy was a topic in the book and about having a healthy relationship and working on your own traumas.
It's so good.
Then for my Patreon book club, I read Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. I was so excited to finally get to this book. My TBR Cards also picked this book as well. And if you want to see my spoiler-filled vlog, because it's a lot, this book was another journey, and I'm so glad I got to read it for my patrons because of that. If you want to see that vlog, my Patreon is linked down below. Check it out. We have a fun time. We do fun stuff. This is described as a whip-smart debut about 3 women, 2 trans and 1 cisgender, and how their lives all combine. It is wild. It is raunchy. It's kinky. It's all of the things. And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe how honest and raw and unapologetic this book was, and how deeply it explored trans realities. I had so many realizations and revelations. I also had so many moments where I was just nodding my head and being like, yes, I relate to this. I totally get this. Like, wow, I'm so excited to see this on the page finally. Like, there are so many things about trans life and wellness and livelihood and struggle and all, just everything was sometimes hard to swallow, but always important, always needed, and always just like welcome. Also, content warnings for this, but I recommend this book hardcore heavily. And then finally, we get to talk about The Art of Dying by Ambrose Parry. This is book 2. I don't know what this series is called. Does this series have a name? It's so good. It's like a medical dark academia series set in 1800s Edinburgh, and we're following a doctor, the doctor's apprentice, and his housemaid on their kind of mystery and thriller adventures. The apprentice, Will Raven, has now become a doctor in his own right, and in this book, we are following a female serial killer, and the 3 of them have to catch this killer, and it is so good. It is so freaking phenomenal. Will Raven was one of my favorite characters, but in this book, he pisses me off so hard. He redeemed himself for me by the end, but like, he's never going to be fully in my good graces. Yeah. Sarah, again, just what an amazing, formidable character. I just could not sing her praises enough. I didn't like that Dr. Simpson wasn't as big of a character in this book as he was in book 1. That's really my only complaint, but obviously I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, so I didn't have that much of a complaint. I wish more people had read this series because it is so underrated and it deserves it. Benedict Cumberbatch bought the rights to the adaptation years ago, and I don't know if anything's ever going to come of it, but I'm just praying that it does someday. But if you are a fan of Sherlock, if you are a fan of Sir Conan Doyle's writing style at all, that witty, investigative, self-aware, comical, and just brilliant, sharp, it's so freaking good. 5 out of 5 stars. All right, y'all, that is going to do it for this video. Thanks again to Book of the Month for sponsoring another one of my videos. Again, my discount code is in the description box below. Code BOWTIES to get your first box for only $9.99. If you want to join my Patreon, that is linked down below as well. Thank you so much for watching another Bowties and Books production. Stay safe, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and I hope to see you in my next one.